Fantasy football players, I am changing my mind on part 2 because you guys love the first video that I did last month. So I'm hitting you with a second version now that we are in preseason and have a little taste of real football to tip us off on certain players. Like I said before, one of the biggest mistakes that you can make in fantasy football is the refusal to change your mind on certain players. It's important to stay flexible and make adjustments as we get news on new players and new coaching staffs and how they're adjusting. Having take lock on multiple players and refusing to unleash your bias is the easiest way to put your fantasy team into a corner. And we have got a lot to talk about. So who are the guys that I am currently changing my mind on? This offseason, I was under the impression that we would be getting a natural discount on Rashee Rice because of the surgery and the risk of literal jail time at any time throughout the season. Now, he's falling a tiny bit in drafts because of all the videos of him looking slow, making people think that he's struggling, but he is still a round 3 pick. That is a hefty price tag for the risk. Now, the reason that I liked Rashee Rice was because in the little time that we saw him last season, it was excellent. We only saw Rice in 8 games in 2025. He was a top 10 receiver in 5 of them, and he averaged nearly 10 targets per game and had 6 touchdowns over that span. The 3 games that he was not a top 10 receiver were against Denver, Houston, and the LA Chargers. Very understandable. Rice was, in fact, a top 5 receiver in average fantasy points per game. It's just that it was only 8 games. The upside is there. But I have been doing a lot of shows on FantasyPros with Pat Fitzmaurice, and I respect his opinion a ton. And there's only so many times that I can hear him talk about Rashee Rice and all the potential downsides that are not even related to the legal issues before it starts to seep in my mind and make me a little bit concerned. And there's one concern that makes a ton of sense. The addition of Kenneth Walker might create a bad ceiling issue for Rice. Now, think back to what I said before. Notice I said 6 touchdowns in 8 games. That's a pretty aggressive pace. Not unrealistic, but it is pretty aggressive. 5 of those were inside the 20. And as a matter of fact, he actually had 11 receptions inside the 20. That is 5th most for a receiver in the league. Again, that was only in 8 games. The problem is that if Walker makes them more effective on the ground and we see a shift more towards red zone usage with Walker and less Rashee Rice, that's a big problem for us. Rice doesn't have the yardage to make him a wide receiver 1 just based off yardage because his ADOT is so low. So now we just don't have the risk of legal issues, i.e. he commits another crime and goes to jail immediately. He also has the risk of the offense shifting more towards the ground in the red zone. Again, the problem is that round 3 is a nice range for very stable picks with similar upside or even a bit higher upside than Rashee Rice. And if you target Rice, it just creates very awkward and risky builds. Like, let's say you start off running back, and then you come around to round 3. Do you trust Rashee Rice as your wide receiver 1 with that risk? No, I don't. I would ideally only want him as my wide receiver 2, with another player as the more stable wide receiver 1. Let's say that you want to go running back in the first round and then invest in an elite tight end. You are still stuck with Rice as your wide receiver 1. So targeting Rice basically pigeonholes you into one specific build. Wide receiver, running back combination, or running back, wide receiver combination in the first 2 rounds. Then you grab Rice in the 3rd, and then you have to reinforce it very quickly with an additional wide receiver just in case, which is a fine build, but I like flexibility. So I did a ton of mock drafts to try to see what teams built with Rashee Rice actually look like, and I gotta be honest, I did not like them. So let's take a look at some of these mock drafts using the RotoWire Mock Draft Simulator. By the way, this video is sponsored by RotoWire, and you can get 25% off through the link below in the video description using my code Tera. Get you access to amazing tools. It's a great way to support my channel, and signing up with RotoWire gets you their fantasy football draft kit, which includes the draft assistant, unlimited simulations in the mock draft simulator, custom rankings, player outlooks, ADP reports, premium content, so much more. And I'm grateful for those unlimited draft simulations because I did run a ridiculous amount of simulations to try to come up with solutions on how you could logically attack Rice in the 3rd, guys. And it's not great. So let's take a look. I used pick 6 in these simulations because I wanted to give you guys a nice middle ground look. So let's take a look here at the first one. Let's say that you take Jonathan Taylor in the 1st, and then you take A.J. Brown in the 2nd. Then you get Rice in the third. Look at the talent that you would have to potentially bypass to get him. Yikes. But you have to do it because he would be gone by the fourth round. So he has to come in the third. Now, when you come around in the fourth, look, Zay Flowers is still there. Fantastic. Gives us another option as a stable wide receiver too. And that leaves us 100% grabbing a running back in the fifth. And Swift is there. So you weren't able to get your high-end top elite option at tight end or quarterback, so then we grab them within the next several picks so you get an idea of the best case scenario if you attack it immediately. So this is our final lineup. It's cool, but it doesn't scream league winner to me. So let's do this in reverse. Let's go wide receiver in the first round with JSN. Hey there, JSN. Now, here is the problem once we come into the second round with targeting Rashee Rice. It knocks you out of Kenneth Walker. Can't do that. Same team. So if he falls there, even if he falls there, can't grab him. So let's say that Henry or Hampton don't fall. You're going to end up with, most likely, Kyren Williams. Then you come around to the third, you grab Rashee Rice. You got to reinforce it with wide receiver again. So we come around to the fourth and we grab Garrett Wilson. And then we go to the fifth and oh no, guys, look at the running backs that are available. There was a running back run right before our pick, so we are stuck choosing with this bunch. And I guess we're picking Bashal Tootin here, who I do like, but man, that's another risky option that we don't know the ultimate upside he's going to have. We're starting to build a roster with a decent amount of risk here. Again, bench players are not shown, and grabbing an elite tight end and quarterback within the next several rounds here, just doing that for your purposes. Obviously, if you see there, Goddard was taken in the eighth. Goddard would not be taken in the eighth, but the available options were guys like Travis Kelce and Isaiah Likely, who I would not take there. So just imagine that you filled up your bench spots and then you took Goddard in the 10th round. This is what the roster would look like. I don't like that either. So Rice just hurts your overall build. It's just not an ideal pick. Again, you can run mock draft simulations just like this to test your ideal lineup at RotoWire and get 25% off through the link below using my code Tera. Link below in the video description. Work out all the kinks in your strategy and figure out what does and does not fit your roster so you can be ready for draft day. So clearly I spent the entire offseason talking about two players from Tampa Bay, Emeka Egbuka and Ted Hurst. I still love them. I'm not changing that. But Chris Godwin's value at his ADP is going overlooked. And the more I start to look at it, the more I start to rub my hands together and say, yeah, I think I like that one too. He's got a round 8 ADP going around a lot of players with multiple big question marks. And the only question mark we have around Godwin is if he can return to peak form. We know he's a starter. Reports say that he looks fantastic. And going in around wide receiver 35 is a very reasonable discount. Tampa Bay has been very open about the alignment of their receivers, and Godwin and Emeka Egbuka will work in tandem, with Godwin out of the slot, Emeka Egbuka as the Z receiver. What that likely means in terms of production is that the most likely scenario is the version of Chris Godwin that we saw several years ago that can get you 120 plus targets, 900 to 1,000 yards, maybe a tiny bit over best case scenario, right? A volume receiver, very suitable for PPR, probably a max of around 5 touchdowns. That's pretty good production for where you are drafting him. Now, Emeka Egbuka would be the candidate for double-digit touchdowns and obviously higher yardage, but solid wide receiver 2 production out of Godwin makes a lot of sense if he is healthy. And if that toe injury lingers for Emeka Egbuka, those touchdowns could slide right over to Godwin, creating an opening for a higher ceiling. I genuinely believe we are in line for a Tampa Bay bounce-back offense. All the pieces are reasonably priced. At the end of the day, I would just make sure that it should be your goal to walk away from drafts with a Tampa Bay receiver. Garrett Wilson is sitting at wide receiver 21 in FantasyPros real-time ADP, and that's honestly crazy to me. I understand that 2025 left a bad taste in your mouth. I get it because it was a wasted year, and it was an irritating waste because the Jets played games with whether or not Garrett Wilson would ultimately return, so we were set in this kind of weird limbo for the majority of the season. But prior to last season, Wilson was a pillar of health, so I don't have major injury concerns for him. Outside of last year, he has had a minimum of 147 targets in every year he has played. That is very impressive considering the ragtag group of quarterbacks he has been playing with. Garrett Wilson's tenure in New York has been depressing from a quarterback situation. Absolutely wild. In 2026, he was playing with Zach Wilson, Mike White, in 4 games with Joe Flacco. In 2023, it was Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, and Tim Boyle. In 2024, that was the Aaron Rodgers year, and lo and behold, that was his single top 10 season, even though he had to also contend with Devontae Adams being added to the team. And last year with Justin Fields was objectively horrendous, truly disturbing. He still managed to get a minimum of 8 targets a game to Wilson and 4 touchdowns over 6 games they played together before the Wilson injury. And in those 6 games, Wilson was a top 12 receiver 4 times. And the times he was not a top 12 receiver were against Buffalo and Denver. I don't particularly believe in Geno Smith, but even if Justin Fields managed to supply top 12 numbers to Garrett Wilson, surely Geno Smith can. Can't be that hard. And if Geno Smith can't, Cade Klubnik, obviously, looked very good in preseason. So I think he's a fine backup there. Very limited action, but we know, based off his quarterback tenure, that there is a potential higher ceiling there. And at the very least, I know that he's not Tim Boyle. And remember, the Jets are rebuilding their defense, so this team won't be able to lean aggressively on the ground game. At the very least, it has to be balanced. They're probably going to throw a decent amount. Omar Cooper Jr. isn't thriving thus far in playing with the second team. Kenyon Sadiq has been dealing with his injury. The wide receiver 2 appears to be A.D. Mitchell. Wilson will get 150 targets again. He is a volume receiver. He will pay off at his ADP. Let me preface this. This is not about Najee Harris, okay? It's not about Najee Harris. Now, I'm struggling with this one, guys. I really am, because you know that I have been very pro Cam Skattebo all off season. I was ready to attack it with reckless abandon. But in their first preseason game, the Giants used a 3-man committee at running back. Perhaps it was caution with Skattebo's injury, but it wasn't as if they played him quickly and removed him like we saw in Cleveland with Quinshon Judkins. You got him out there real quick, remove him. Dylan Sampson came in. No, that's not what happened. They played Skattebo, then they played Tracy, then they played Singletary, then they went back to Skattebo. That's not a good sign here. And I'm not one to typically overreact to a preseason game, but I'm not lying. I don't really trust Matt Nagy, so there were already issues there in general that I was having to get past. And my trust was mainly at quarterback, but it's bleeding over into all the other positions. And Malik Neighbors gets a pass from a pure volume perspective, kind of similar to Garrett Wilson. There's just so many targets that will be funneling his way. But everybody else is looking very shaky, and I've got concerns. And now that has gone to Cam Skattebo. He thrived last year in a very limited sample size, but thrived as a 3-down back. He should be a 3-down back. I would use him as a 3-down back if there were not any concerns about needing to ease him in, which I would totally understand. If the Giants would come out and say, hey, we're just going to ease him in for about 2-3 games, and then it's full, all workload, Cam Skattebo, that's our RB1, that's cool. I can handle a little easing in off of an injury. But we're not particularly getting that. That is the concern there. We have to speculate. We truly don't know what is going on here. And it's not like a team like the LA Chargers where Mike McDaniel came out and tried to throw us off talking about, well, we're going to use all 3 backs. We don't really have to be concerned about that because it's a high volume offense with ample goal line opportunities. And Justin Herbert runs, but he's not a major competing factor at the goal line. So it's not the same situation as the Giants. I need one of 2 things to happen here with Cam Skattebo. His ADP has to fall back in a range where he's being drafted after a lot of those high upside wide receivers. That's the problem. It's not particularly the running backs being drafted around him. It's the fact that overall he is falling into a range where I just like the wide receivers better. And I would rather draft the wide receiver and push running back a little bit. So I would ideally like Skattebo's ADP to fall back a little bit. Or the Giants need to make it very clear that the way that they use their back in the preseason games is not how they will do it in regular season. Now, this one is not a big change in my perspective because I have talked about all offseason fading RJ Harvey. This is not new information. But what is changing is that I really did try very hard to come around to the idea of RJ Harvey at value because RB36 is objectively a really good price for a guy who did take over as a 3-down back for J.K. Dobbins when Dobbins went down and did give us 4 top 12 performances in those 7 games that he played in the regular season without J.K. Dobbins. So if Dobbins were to go down, you can work it in your mind saying 3-down back, yeah, that is worth the price tag. So I get it. We know that Dobbins won't make it through the season, so I understand why people would want to do this. I try to keep an open mind. But unfortunately now, that door that was open, it is slammed shut. I'm not doing it, period. Not happening. Whatever open-mindedness that I had is gone. Do not subject yourself to the RJ Harvey experience this year. Target Jonah Coleman as a late-round dart, though, instead. Now, the problem here is that I do not believe for 1 second that Sean Payton is handing this backfield over to RJ Harvey. It's a permanent committee. Do not try to convince yourself that the receiving work within this committee will carry Harvey through the season. It won't. It's going to be a boom-bust scenario where he gives you 3 points one week, 20 points the next week, 5 points for 4 straight games, and then maybe another boom. It'll be random and chaotic. In your typical redraft league, that would just not be an enjoyable experience if you have to start him that way. He is basically a version of Travion Henderson that is cheaper, but doesn't really have the same opportunity to ever be a 3-down back. We know that if Ramondre Stevenson goes down, Travion Henderson would be the 3-down back there. Now that Jonah Coleman is in Denver, that opportunity does not exist. And he definitely would not be as productive with the receiving work. He would not be as productive with what limited touches he gets on the ground because he's just not as effective. Harvey is just not as effective as Henderson is. He's not. That's harsh. I don't want to be harsh. But I'm also telling you right now, Sean Payton really likes Jonah Coleman. And for all we know, he might like him so much that this is a 3-man committee right off the bat. Look me in the eye and tell me that you do not remember what he did when Javonte Williams was the lead back. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can find me across all social media platforms at It's Tera Time, so make sure that you're locked in, tuned in, subscribe, turn on notifications, and all that good stuff. And also make sure to take advantage of that 25% off at RotoWire with code Tera, T-E-R-A, and use the link below in the description. Thank you for watching this video. We'll talk to you